you talking about cash? You had
Yeah, $7,000 cash.
This
I
is
just brought it
probably
home.
U.S. cash?
Yeah. I just brought it home.
So,
and I think I paid my debts with
Yes.
that. I think I did.
just you walk into the bank or whatever.
Yeah, like I probably look like some sort of like shady dealer or something. Yeah.
It's my drug money.
Literally, yeah.
This is the Personal Finance Show.
Hi, I'm Bo Humphreys, and this is the Personal Finance Show. Rubina Ahmed-Haq wants you to know that personal finance can be exciting. Rubina is a personal finance expert and has been a broadcast journalist for 20 years. Rubina's experience in broadcasting means that she has this ability to take dry financial topics and make them interesting. 20 years in broadcast journalism also means that Rubina has some very interesting stories, some of which you will hear in this interview. Rubina did an excellent job as host of the Canadian Personal Finance Conference this past November, and I'm excited to be helping her launch her new podcast called Dear Rubi. Head to dearrubi.com, that's DearRubi.com, for details on how you can be part of the podcast. Rubina joined me in the studio in Hamilton to share her personal finance story.
My earliest money memory is going for lunch in middle school at the pizza that was behind our school. And a slice of pizza was $2.25.
Okay.
Often there were kids that didn't have enough money, so we'd all get our quarters together to make sure everyone could get a slice.
Oh.
And I remember specifically once that I didn't have enough money. I was really bummed that I couldn't get the slice of pizza. And my friend lent me 2 quarters, which made up the difference that I needed to get the slice of pizza. And it kind of taught me that when I get my allowance, I've got to be a little bit more careful because I want to be, because we used to go, I can't remember which day, but there was always one day we all went. So it was kind of an event. Like we'd leave the school ground, we'd walk to Pizza, we'd all eat pizza, and then we'd go back to class or back to school after lunch hour. And not having enough money to get the pizza was really stressing me out. And my friend came to my rescue. So that's my earliest money memory, which is kind of coupled with a lesson that if you want something, you've got to save for it and you've got to watch your cash flow so that when that opportunity comes that you're not asking others for cash to make it happen.
And a couple of quarters can make a difference.
Yeah.
You don't think it will. Oh, should I have bought that candy? But then you realize I won't. You didn't maybe know that you won't be able to buy the pizza because you weren't like tracking your coins, right?
Yeah.
That early.
Yeah.
So what age was this?
Well, it was grade 7 or 8. So what are you in that age?
Like 13?
11, 11, 12 or 13.
Yeah, let's say that.
So tween, I guess I was a tween.
Yeah.
Old enough to know and young enough to still be a little bit irresponsible with my money.
And you're getting an allowance at that time.
Getting
that's
an
how
allowance.
You got that money?
Yeah, I believe it was $5 a week or something.
Sure. So you had to ration that.
Yeah.
When was the first time you started making money for yourself? Did you get a job like 14, 15, that kind of thing? Or did you work at all?
No, the first time I ever made money for myself, I guess I did babysitting.
Sure.
That was a little bit of money. But my first job was at a daycare. And I was paid minimum wage. And I would go there every day after school. And I would work from 4 until 6, basically till the daycare closed. And my job was basically to help the teachers in the classroom and do a little bit of cleanup at the end and go home. So that was my first job. And I would make, I don't know what minimum wage was at the time, but whatever it was, every day I was making that much times 2 because I was working 2 hours every day.
Okay. And what are you doing with the money? Do you remember at that time? Like, what is money for you other than the pizza and other things like that? Just spending?
Yeah, I think I was just spending it. I don't think I was saving anything. I was already aware that if I wanted bigger things that I'd have to save up for it, but I wasn't doing any long-term savings. I wasn't thinking about my future, but I definitely would think, okay, I want to get this really cool top, or I want to go see a movie with my friend. And so I would be definitely saving money out of that paycheck in order to make that happen. So I guess very, very early on, I realized that you have to you have to save money if you want to get the big things like
Mm-hmm.
the movie and the new top.
Well, did your parents have anything to do with this? Did they talk to you about money?
Oh, yeah. Money was a huge conversation in my family. So we knew from a very young age what my dad's salary was. We knew what the house was worth. We knew what the bills were. My parents were first generation to this country. They moved here when they were in their 20s. And so there was a lot of responsibility of sending money back home as well to help elderly parents and maybe others who just did not have the opportunity that my parents did. So every dollar had to be spent very wisely in order to not just keep our household running, but also to make sure that the responsibilities that they had taken upon themselves of taking care of people in another country, that those were being also fulfilled.
Mm-hmm. Where did they come from?
Pakistan.
Yeah,
Pakistan.
And were they already skilled at doing something when they came over, like educated, or did they get that here?
So my dad went to school in England, and so he
nice.
has, he's an urban planner, like he's a town planner, and so he took town planning when I believe I believe he studied town planning in Pakistan and then went to Leeds and did his master's. He worked in England for 10 years and then he married my mom and then they came here. So, like little stories I hear, like how my grandfather had to sell property in order to fund my dad's education. So from a very early on, we realized that, it takes sacrifice to make things happen and you use your money wisely. Like, that money that he used to help my dad with his education meant that my dad could move out of the country, obviously get a much better job. He worked in Canada, he worked for the Ministry of Housing Municipal Affairs for, 40 years.
Sounds like a really secure, probably well-paying job.
Super secure. My dad is a super conservative investor.
And a pension.
And he has a pension. Yeah. So, even these days, we know exactly what his pension is, which is sometimes a point of...
You talk about that.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to tell you what his pension is. He'd probably be annoyed.
You don't have to do it online, but the fact that you guys talk about it is great.
Yeah, sometimes it annoys me because... I'll be like, well, you should pick up all the checks. You've got this fat pension coming in. You should treat us all the time. But,
well, that's a good point. Is that why we don't talk about money? Because then, you make way more money than me. You should pay for this.
Yeah, I think so. It's kind of I think money, we start to make assumptions about people. If you have this money, then you should share it. And not everybody wants to share, I guess. And money also, just in a wider conversation, money also gives people worth. Like if you make six figures, people treat you differently than if you say I make $30,000 a year. It's just a fact of life. Like people respect just because you say you make a certain salary. And so it can be difficult sometimes to talk about money if maybe you don't make the kind of salary that people would be impressed with.
Mm-hmm. And do you remember, so you're doing your daycare and you're going through high school. Yeah. And you get another job?
I did. So I didn't do the daycare job for very long.
No.
I'm not very good with kids. Even as a mother, I'm not very maternal.
I'm sure you're fine with your kids.
I'm fine with my own children, but I got kids in big groups really make me nervous.
Yeah, me too, I guess.
Yeah, I'm not a big send all your kids over to my house, I'll babysit them. I'm not. I'm not into that. I love babysitting my niece and nephew. Well, I only have a nephew, not a niece, but I love babysitting them. But if 10 kids come over, I start to really get nervous.
That sounds horrible to me.
Sounds terrible, yeah. So I worked at a jean store for most of my high school life. From when I was, I think 16 was when you could start working in the mall. So I quit my daycare job because I didn't like it. And then I remember thinking to myself, I think it was July or August, that I was going to give myself a 1 month window to find a better job. And so I guess for me, a better job meant working in the mall because that's a step up from working in a daycare, I guess. And it took me a week because, it's just about putting yourself out there. And even though I had zero experience, I just walked in and I said, well, I have some experience working in this daycare. I'm only 16. What experience do you expect me to have? What? It's isn't it kind of on commission anyways? If I don't do a good job, I'm not going to really get much money because you made minimum wage and you made a part of the commission of the clothing that you were able to sell.
So some incentive for you then, yeah.
So I worked there for 4 years. And I remember just the other day I was thinking, I had this math teacher, Mr. Tallahassee was his name.
That sounds like a made-up name, but yeah.
No, his name was Mr. Tallahassee, and his face was kind of he was an older gentleman, but he had face, I don't know how to explain it, but it almost looked like his face was made of something edible, because it was just very soft. Does that make sense? But in a very
I'm trying here.
Like it was just like it was like his face was
like a
hanging.
sponge.
Yeah, like I just remember him having this very unique texture to his face, even though I never touched his face.
So a face you've never seen on anybody else, obviously.
No,
cause
but a man that you would, like a teacher that I would go to if I wanted to ask a question about my life. So I remember Mr. Tallahassee.
Friendly.
Yeah, so he said to me, like, I fell asleep in class. And then after class, he's like, I want to talk to you. And I was like, okay. And he's like, what's going on with you? And I was like, what do you mean? He goes, why are you falling asleep in my class? I'm like, I don't know. He goes, are you working? And I said, yeah, I have this new job. I work at this store called the Blue Jean. And I was there till like 9:30 because, mall closes at 9.
Yeah.
Takes half an hour to clean up. And he told me at that time, he goes, I think you should quit that job. I think you should focus on your studies. And I even then was like, no way. I want to make money. I want to bring in a paycheck.
Yeah.
But now thinking back with my own kids, and this might be counterintuitive to everything that I ever say in my articles and blogs, is that I think that there is something to be said about keeping kids focused on the reason why they go to school rather than pushing them into the economy too early and kind of asking them, well, you've got to now have this job and you've got this other job of going to school. I ended up dropping, I finished his math class, but I didn't take any advanced math. I didn't take algebra. I didn't take anything that I think if I at the time had, because we used to have OAC.
Well, yeah,
back
that's
then.
why I was just thinking we're the same generation-ish.
Yeah.
OAC generation.
So I didn't take OAC algebra.
Yeah.
A lot of my friends did, and I feel like that was a disservice. Like I should have focused on that.
Well, I took it, and I'm going to tell you it wasn't a huge loss. But no, but that's a really good point. To your comment, what is the purpose of going to school, like, for the kids? What is their job? What's the end result supposed to be?
Well, I think that's their job. We all get up in the morning with a purpose.
Yeah.
Some of us go to work. Some of us are stay-at-home moms. Some of us freelance. Whatever it is, we wake up every morning. And kids, it's very structured. It's very easy to understand. And so you're already teaching them how to be at work. You go, you show up on time. You do what is, what's expected of you. You're polite.
I like that.
You meet your deadlines, which is essentially what work is.
Yeah, yeah.
And so going back to the example of my math teacher saying to me, you need to quit this job. He was thinking from that perspective that she is not focusing on the stuff that matters and is too much involved with how much money can I make so I can get some cool stuff.
I never thought of high school that way. Like, you're right. It's teaching you structure.
Yeah.
If anything. Like, you're learning about stuff, which is great, Yeah. I mean, you might know the capital of countries, and there's a lot of stuff that it really just seems peripheral to your life once you get out there. But you got to touch on everything. But it's really more about that. Like, university is really, to me, it's about learning how to be social and interacting with others, but also achieving the thing, right? So, like, you're learning structure, but you're also going towards that goal of getting a diploma or getting a degree. Yeah, doing something else takes away from that.
Of course. Multitasking is completely overrated.
You're right.
And like we were just sort of talking about this before, but even just like taking stressors out of your life and multitasking stresses me out. And the way that I explain it is that if I'm trying to do too many things after dinner, like I'm trying to clean up the kitchen, I'm trying to get my kids to bed, and then I break a glass, that glass is going to take me a half an hour to clean up. Yeah. So if I just slowed down 20% and done one thing at a time, I would have saved myself the stress of losing that glass and also cleaning it up. I would have probably saved myself time too, because in the end, you're going to make some mistake that's going to set you back where that multitasking isn't going to matter. So I think it's true. Like, I want my kids to work when they are teenagers because I think that there's definitely something about building work ethic when you're young that stays with you your whole life. But I don't want them to work at the detriment of their studies. And I would rather have my daughter be on the school council and be working in that way.
Yeah,
extracurriculars and learning about, if her job is to go to school, being on school council just enhances that experience rather than putting her in a mall somewhere and saying, make minimum wage and understand the economy. There's so much time for her to do that. But my economic situation is different than my parents. I wasn't able to go to my dad and say, can you buy me the latest Jordans, because he couldn't afford to. So I'd have to make the money so I could buy them. That kind of thing.
And so, we all have to make those decisions based on our situations. Like, it totally makes sense what you're saying. We need to make sure that the focus isn't solely on money, because then your kids will get out and say they're at a job and somebody says, hey, you want to be on this committee or whatever? And they're like, no, I want to just drive sales, you know, and all that. And then the president doesn't notice them at the committee meeting and they don't get whatever promotion, or their resume doesn't look very good because all they did was focus on creating profit, which is good and all, but it's not everything.
Yep.
So I guess that's the risk of that. So you kept that job.
I kept it.
And you didn't take the maths.
I didn't take any of the OAC maths. Yes.
So you took whatever OACs you needed to take. Did you go to university?
I did, yeah.
So you got 6 credits of some kind?
Mostly in liberal arts, because I wanted to be a journalist and
Sure.
a lot of writing.
So you knew that when did you realize that?
I tell this story so much that I feel like I've added to it. So there was a journalist that came to our school, and I don't remember what year it was, but at the time said, you have a really good broadcast voice.
Interesting. I would agree.
Thank you. And so I said, oh. And I wanted to write as it was. So my whole high school life, I was very much into my girlfriends and hanging out and, like watching 90210. And
not really academic.
I wasn't really, but at the same time, I was still able to get okay grades.
Yeah.
And so, again, I go back to that example. I wish I'd sort of known that about myself and because the reason I would work is because I'd want to get money so I could hang out with my cool friends and have cool stuff. So sort of check my priorities if I could go back. So I did. I went to university. I went to Carleton my first year, and then I came back and I finished my degree at York. Then I did postgrad journalism at Humber College.
Okay. Who paid for school?
My first year, my father paid my tuition.
Nice.
And after that, I was on my own.
Okay. So how'd you do that?
I was really lucky. I didn't work in university.
Okay.
That's one thing I dropped.
Like the teacher,
yeah,
I want to
maybe.
call him Delicious Face or something.
Like he kind of had
Tallahassee. We'll call him that.
Mr. Tallahassee.
We'll have to send him a copy.
I wish I knew his
episode.
first name so I could look him up. I have this fear that I think he might have passed because he was pretty close to retirement. This is going back to 1995.
Sure.
But because I did find a teacher online and we connected. There's quite a few teachers, but I mean, because they, at the time, you think about it, you're 16, they might just be 30, and they're kind of like,
they seem like they're ancient,
but they're
us.
not. Yeah. There's this teacher, Mr. Anastasios. We used to call him Mr. A. He's now an actor. He's left teaching. Okay. He's an actor. But I'm friends with him on Facebook. It's really kind of odd to think that he was my science teacher and now he's like my friend on Facebook. And
exactly.
And I saw him once on Bloor Street in Toronto, just coming out of a cafe or something. And I remember I said I saw him in a movie. I think I saw him in Dodgeball. Remember that movie?
What? He was in Dodgeball?
Well, he was in the audience. He was an extra, but they did a very long kind of hold on his face. I'm like, I think it was Dodgeball. And I'm like, were you in that movie? He was like, I sure was. I'm like, that's just hilarious.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I paid for my own university education, and I had this really great opportunity. A friend of mine knew someone at the City of Toronto, so she introduced me to, I guess, a hiring manager or somebody that got us, a bunch of us that all at the end we realized knew this one person. So maybe he created a program for students. I'm not sure how it worked, but we were paid at the time $12 an hour, which was crazy because that was a great salary for a young person to make.
Wait, this is during school still?
This is during university, but I only worked there in the summer.
So you were able to make enough to pay?
Well, I think in the summer I would make like $3,000, $4,000,
and that
was enough
right.
with
OSAP.
With OSAP and other student loans. I also had a student line of credit. I was able to make it happen.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so did you come out with some debt then?
I did, and in fact, I like the debts, like the OSAP debt, I paid pretty quickly because it's a different feeling you have because it's student debt, but the line of credit lingered for a long time because. The line of credit was used, to pay my tuition, but then later on it was used to help me set up my apartment.
So it was open, it was revolving.
It was always revolving, always open.
A loan versus a line of credit, right?
Yeah.
And you were able to pay, was it a smaller amount for OSAP?
I think when I graduated, my total debt was about $20,000. And I think 5 or 6 of that was on the line of credit. And the rest of that was government loan.
Oh, so you paid off the big amount. Yeah.
I paid off the big amount, but because And I think I used part of my line of credit to pay that off too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I paid that off quickly because I didn't want to have to pay a higher interest on it because, they charge you after.
They start going up.
But I had debt. I mean, and I think that graduating with debt is not a bad thing because you get an education out of it, right?
Yeah, so you didn't mind having the debt, or you weren't too focused on I got to get rid of this?
Well, I was living at home and I was freelancing at CTV. So I was making okay money. So it was not difficult for me to pay it down. I think my dad might have set me up with some sort of plan of how I'm going to get the debt paid down. I think while that was happening, I also racked up a $6,000 credit card bill that my dad found.
So you're learning about credit cards.
I have no idea why American Express gave me someone who was a student and then making, I think, $30,000, $20,000 a year, $6,000, availability on a credit card.
I had $19,000 limit when I was making $35.
Yeah, it's insane how much.
If we can make a difference and at one point change these rules, let's do it, because it's just wrong. It's so wrong.
I don't know how universities I don't know if they still do. I'm pretty sure they do because they make money. These credit card companies onto campus. I think that is you're 18 years old. You barely learned how to do basic things for yourself because you're living on your own for the first time. You're just getting to know yourself and how you are, your adult self. And then they throw you a credit card, which as an 18-year-old, you're like, credit card means I'm grown up and I want that credit card.
Well, it means you're grown up, but what are you using it for? Just living?
Yeah. I mean, I was using it on junk. Why would I need a credit card? My tuition was, so for example, my first year, my tuition was paid. My dad paid my tuition. I paid because I also had savings that were my savings, but really from my mom. It was, I don't know if did they have RESP back then? I'm not even sure.
I'm not sure how far it goes back.
Yeah, but they had some savings for me.
Sure.
And so my dad gave me the option. He's like, you can use this all to pay your housing so that first year you're done, but it's your money, or you can use it over. So I said, I'll use it all to pay my housing.
Nice.
So everything was taken care of. I mean, I had a meal plan. I didn't need a credit card. What was I buying?
You got the credit card, and then something in your brain opened up for spending.
Yeah.
It's this is money.
Yeah, and this is easy money, right? And I can buy drinks for my friends. I can go and get this article of clothing. I can afford to go to a movie. All these things that I always thought were unattainable. All of a sudden, that plastic card made them. It's
freedom until we realize it's not.
Yeah.
And so you got this $6,000 bill. This is probably, you maxed it out.
Pretty much.
And what was so you said your dad had to step in? My
dad paid it off, and then I had to pay him back. And so I think that got me, I think that's the last time I've ever done something like that. Yeah. It is the last time. I think I was 22, 23 years old. Sure. So he got me on whatever, you're paying me $600 a month for 10 months or whatever the plan was. I had to pay him back.
Your dad was a bankruptcy trustee.
Yeah, basically. and he didn't take interest. I mean, he could have. Thinking back, I'm like, he should have charged me interest because he's taking money away that he can be using to invest. And I don't know, maybe it's out of his own line of credit. Who knows where he got the money from?
That's true.
He didn't charge me interest.
Well, that's nice. But you didn't need interest as incentive to pay your dad back.
I don't know. I
mean, I think miss a payment?
I don't think so. No.
Yeah.
I think with my dad, I've always sort of valued that we can go to him and ask him for money because money was an open topic in my household, because I knew how my parents were about managing money and how careful they were. It's kind of like the ultimate insult to not pay him.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah,
I can't think of anything that's more insulting.
There's
than
that accountability and respect.
Yeah.
As well. Yeah. There. And of course we don't have that with giant corporations that we don't know.
Yeah.
Right. It's just, that's why they have to charge us interest. But then do you think you maybe didn't learn the lesson of interest at that point, or did you kind of get what was going to happen if you didn't pay it off right away? The minimum payments, and you'll never be able to really pay this down. Did that you kind of skip over that at that point?
I think I did learn that this credit card interest rate was going to destroy me.
Yeah,
I think I did learn, and I think I learned that from the fact that it probably was, only maybe $5,000, and then every month they were adding interest.
Yeah,
so I was seeing it with my own eyes.
So you got to see a little bit of it.
Because part of that $6,000 was interest. It wasn't like 1 month I spent $6,000.
Sure.
I was just making minimum payments and using whatever room I had to get stuff.
So you got a little bit of the minimum payment interest game, enough to make you realize, this is dumb? But you have credit after that, though? Just responsible credit?
Yeah, I think that was the last time that I've ever
Yeah.
been really irresponsible, like especially something like a high interest credit card. I did have a line of credit for a little while after I moved. I lived in England for 2 years. So when I moved to England, it was expensive, and I was in a little bit of debt when I came home. So I had to dip into my line of credit to basically pay my credit card in England off, because it wasn't even a question of me. I was using it to buy things I needed, but at least I had the know-how. As soon as I get back to Canada, I know I have this job. I'm going to use the money to pay this credit card off. So I already had I didn't have to go to anybody and say, help me. I just paid it off. I think it was £1,500.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that for a bit. So first of all, how'd you get into CTV right away after university? Was it just applying?
So I was at Humber College, and this is the best time that you can take advantage of the fact that you are surrounded by, wannabe journalists,
Sure.
right? First of all, everybody's looking, so you can talk to everybody and see what everyone's doing. But the number one thing happened was a woman named Joanne McDonald, who still works at CTV. She's now, I believe, the head of CP24, general manager, came in, and I don't know what her role was then, but she came in and she said, this was 1999, so everyone was worried the world was going to kind of blow up in 2000.
Y2K.
Y2K, exactly. And she's like, if any of you guys want freelance work this Christmas, we will hire you. It was an opportunity for me because my parents lived in Scarborough and CTV is in Scarborough. I could almost walk to the studio.
Okay.
So it was just across, my parents are at McCowan and Ellesmere, and the studio is at McCowan and Shepherd. So it's just one block. It's not far at all.
And you wanted to write? This is what you...
Well, I wanted to be in broadcast journalism.
So you got to start.
Yeah, I got to start somewhere.
Okay.
So I emailed her or whatever I did. I don't know. And I said, I want to work these 2 weeks that I'm home.
Yeah.
And so she put me to work. And I remember I worked on 1999 into 2000. I worked that evening. Although I didn't stay until the ball dropped. But
on New Year's Eve.
On New Year's Eve,
okay.
I worked... I think I worked until about 8 o'clock, and then everything was in place. And then the message was, if things go crazy, we need you to come back, kind of thing, right? So I was
the world breaks.
Yeah. And we went down, I think we went downtown or something to actually see, to celebrate the new year. But it was amazing to be in that newsroom on New Year's Eve. And that led to everything. That was the opening of everything. At the time, I think I was 24 years old. I was obviously I haven't grown taller. I was a small person, but even smaller, in size. And I just felt very, always felt like I was pretending to be an adult. I always had this, I still kind of feel like that. I'm pretending to be an adult.
Like imposter syndrome.
Very much so. Yeah. So when you walk into a newsroom like CTV, I don't know if you've been there, it's beautiful. It's this huge studio. The desk where at the time it was Lloyd Robertson. His desk is right there, and you see faces that you only see on television, and you have access to them. It's so intimidating.
Yeah.
And I remember being a really awkward freelance. I think my title was editorial assistant, and just sort of standing around waiting for someone to tell me what to do. And one of the assignment editors was like, don't wait for someone to tell you what to do. Just do something. You can go online, you can find stories, you can pitch me an idea. I would never learn those lessons in journalism.
They didn't teach you that in school.
No, they don't teach you. I mean, I think that exists in every single business, is that you have to be, everyone's new at one point in their life. And you just got to get in there and let that time pass so that then you can start to show off your talents. Because no one just hits the ground running. It's impossible.
No, you got to learn. And what did you learn in school, though?
Oh, I went to journalism school. I mean, I remember even small things. I remember like a teacher telling me, don't ever ask a question where the answer can be yes and no. So to this day, I mean, it's such a small thing. But when I hear journalists ask questions like, did you like the show? I'm like, what kind of, you don't say, did you like the show? Just say, what about the show did you really enjoy? You have to ask a question where they're going to have a conversation with you. Otherwise, they're just going to, because if the person is camera shy, they're just going to say yes.
Well, that would make for an uninteresting interview between the two of us right now, too.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If I was asking you just yes or no questions, right?
Yeah, exactly. And but reporters do it all the time. As it is with anything in university, you take a few things and you make a career out of it. It's not like you remember every single thing that you learn.
Yeah.
Going to journalism school, a lot of people will still say, oh, you can become a journalist without going to journalism school. I think that's completely not true. I think you need to surround yourself, especially because the professors that are teaching you are former journalists, or even Judy Charles, I think her name was Judy Charles, was a broadcaster at CBC and teaching at Humber.
Oh, cool.
And when I started working at CBC, I saw her and it was great. Like, it's such a nice full circle moment.
That's awesome.
Everything you taught, because she taught radio broadcast, the things that she taught me, I was putting it into practice.
So did you go to England next then?
So I was at, this is where it gets interesting.
Yeah.
So I was at CTV 1999. I was there for that .com. And then after that, they gave me a job on the weekend.
I figured they hired you on somehow.
Yeah. So I actually, at Humber College, in your second year, if you can show that you're legitimately working in a newsroom, you can actually get credits for that rather than having to go to class. Because their whole program, it's a college program, is to get you working. It's not necessarily you've got to do the assignments. Like, they'll graduate you even if you weren't in class if you can show that you were learning in the newsroom. So I had this job. So I was working a lot. So I basically moved back home to Scarborough because I lived across the street.
There.
I was right there. And then, so this was 1999. So I worked there all throughout 2000. I graduated Humber College, no problem. Then I was working at Canada AM. I was working still on the CTV news desk. I was working at Newsnet. I was doing all those things. And September 11th happened.
Wow.
So September 11th happens. And this senior editor, Trevor Bindu, who I'm also friends with on Facebook, comes up to me and he says, "This is your time." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "You have a visa in your passport to go to Pakistan, because I know you just went to Pakistan 6 months ago to visit your family."
Yeah.
He goes, "Is that an open visa?" I said, "Yeah, it's a 5-year visa." He goes, "You should go to Pakistan."
Wow.
I go, "Why should I go to Pakistan?" He goes, "Because you're going to learn more that way than sitting here in this newsroom." He goes, "And you speak Urdu." He goes, "Do not waste this. This is your time."
Oh, nice.
So I went home and I was like, so this is my time and I got to go. And I don't know what kind of convincing I did, because I think to myself now, having children, I don't know how I would let my daughter, even though my parents...
You're a grown adult, though.
I don't know. I like a 26-year-old girl, you just send her off. Like, I know. I'm a woman. I know I'm a woman. I'm not a girl. But it was because I'd been working. I had money. So I just went and bought a ticket. I just went and bought a British Airways ticket. I remember it was $1,600. I bought the ticket. I'm like, okay. CTV wrote me a letter saying that I was coming to Pakistan to work with Matt McClure, who was the correspondent at the time in Pakistan.
Yeah.
I love telling this story. It's like so nostalgic.
Oh, good.
So as soon as I got to obviously I quit my job at CTV. I was like, well, maybe I'll come back. I don't know. And went there. I worked with Matt McClure for 2 weeks. Like, pretty intense. Basically, I was his assistant, like, you know, because we didn't have smartphones and all that. So I would go down to the internet cafe in the Marriott Hotel and I would print off all his emails. I would print off any relevant information that he needed to know. I'd get his day set up. I would do interviews for him. I would translate stuff. Then there was riots happening in Islamabad because people were upset about the war.
Yeah.
I got separated from him during a riot that we were covering. And CTV found out about it, or something happened and someone found out about it, that I had been separated. They started to get really nervous.
Yeah.
And so then they wanted to find out what they were. I don't want to speak for them because I don't know exactly what happened behind the scenes.
Sure.
But basically the message I was given was, we can't insure you. Like, we cannot insure you. Insurance on you is like $1,000 a day or something.
Yeah.
Like, we just cannot insure you. So you have to immediately stop working with Matt McClure. And it was like, they're like, this moment, you cannot do anything work-wise with him. And I'm like, you guys wrote me this letter. You sent me here. You said I could work with him. And now you're telling me. And so I was devastated. I'm like, I haven't even paid my $1,600 plane ticket off yet. Like, what's going on, right?
Yeah.
So I was at dinner at the French embassy in Islamabad with Matt McClure.
This is where I saw this interview going, by the way. I knew this. French embassy, Matt McClure, and I believe his name is Mario Sertaneg. Okay. I believe his name is that. He works for the New York Times. Okay.
And so I think his first name is Mario. And he's a really famous guy. I should really know what his name is. He said to me, tomorrow you come to the Marriott Hotel. I'm going to be in the pool area. Just come and I'm going to talk to you because you need some guidance.
Yeah.
So I went there, and this guy is like old-time journalist, right? Like, he's just awesome. He's like, he might as well have been smoking a cigar sitting out there, like waiting for him to like bestow his wisdom on me.
I'm picturing all of this.
Yeah, it's like, it was just, I mean, when I think about the opportunity back then and how I didn't even understand how big it was.
Sure.
So anyways, I went there and he goes, this hotel is full of news networks, like news agencies. You just go from door to door to door with your resume and your Urdu translation,
which is your ticket, which
is my
right?
ticket. He goes, you are a Canadian citizen. You went to journalism school in Canada.
Yeah.
You speak the local language and you have connections here.
This is your
you
time.
You sell it. This is your time. So that's what I did. So I started with the big guys. I went right up to the presidential suite because CTV had a relationship with ABC. So I'd already been around ABC a little bit. So I went right up to ABC. And now his name, Leo Meidlinger, was the guy, bureau chief. He's now passed.
I can overdub all of it'll just be like the real names if you get them wrong.
Leo Meidlinger. Yeah, maybe. I mean, it's okay. If I get them wrong, it's been a long time.
That's right.
He's, from what I understand, he has passed away, but I was like, this is what happened to me. I was kind of a wreck, to be honest. And he's like, we'll hire you. You're not an American.
Right
like,
away.
We're not worried.
Right away.
Yeah.
Like, you went to the top in the first one.
Yeah.
And they said, sure.
Yeah. And then he said, what do you want me to pay you? And I'm like, and I lowballed to the max. Like, I could have asked for so much more money.
Of course.
Because later I realized people were getting paid 4 or 5 times more than I was, but I couldn't go back.
It's like danger pay, right? Is that what it was kind of like at that time?
Yeah, like I could have asked for anything.
Oh.
I could have asked for anything. And so all that happened, and I worked for ABC for, 3 months until they didn't need me anymore. And it just happened that my cousin was getting married in Lahore. So I was like, I'll just extend my holiday and stay for this wedding. Went to her wedding. She was super happy. I had lots of money too, because I'd make tons of cash off ABC. And I had so many contacts, like so many contacts, like, Anthony Bourdain passed away recently, and the executive producer for his show Parts Unknown in the beginning was a guy I worked with.
Okay.
Yeah, Vinny Malhotra. And I Facebooked him and I'm like, I'm so sorry to hear about, I know that you were on the show.
Anthony,
and like, these are contacts, like, I feel like I've never really used them. Maybe I could use them one day. I also met Wilf Dinnick, who now I wouldn't say we're friends, but we are definitely people that keep in touch. Like Wilf Dinnick, he's a Canadian journalist. Now he works in the Middle East, mostly. He lives in the Middle East. He was working at Global News. And so I was in like this scrum and I saw the Global News thing. I'm like, are you with Global News in Toronto? He's like, yeah, I'm the videographer and the reporter. I'm here covering. 3 days later, he came into ABC News and I don't know what I was doing. And he's like, would ABC release you for a day to come work with me? And so I talked to Leo Meidlinger and he's like, yeah, sure, go. And so we went to this like school where I did a bunch of interviews, like, because all the girls spoke Urdu and I did the translation and we have all these great pictures of us like doing,
This is awesome.
So that's how, and then I wanted to be a foreign correspondent then. After that experience, I didn't want to be a foreign correspondent anymore.
Okay,
it wasn't
so
for me.
That at least you learned that early on, right? So
yeah.
It wasn't always like a pipe dream or something and then you found out that, okay, maybe I did it. Right? Yeah.
To be a foreign correspondent, you really have to give your life to journalism.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to do that.
Sure.
I didn't want to do that. Sometimes I will think, like, I have seen people go very far, that the same people that were around me. George Stephanopoulos was in our office. Like, I mean, these people are just there. Christiana Amanpour was in the office. Like, because even though she was with CNN, we were all working together.
Yeah,
it was all the same.
Same thing, right?
But everybody came from, like, broken marriages or strain on relationships or no relationship at all, because your job becomes your life. And so that was how I ended up there.
Okay. So how long total were you in Pakistan then?
I think I was there from September, just after September 11th. Yeah. So whatever, 16th or 17th, I think I went. Sure. And I came back right in the new year. Okay. I believe I came back New Year's Eve day.
Lots happened. You have a lot of New Year's memories.
I think I came back New Year's Eve day and I made $7,000, which was a fortune.
Yeah.
I remember asking, I'm like, how much cash am I allowed to carry? They're like, up to 10,000, you don't have to declare it, which is still the rule. They should probably up
money
it now.
Laundering.
So I was like, I have 7,000. Perfect. I just put it in my, it's kind of an idiot. I just put it in my wallet, like in a money bag.
Are you talking about cash? You had
$7,000 cash. I just brought it home.
Probably U.S. cash?
Yeah. I just brought it home. So, and I think I paid my debts with that. I think I did.
Just you walk into the bank or whatever.
Yeah, I probably look like some sort of like shady dealer or something.
It's my drug money.
Literally, yeah.
But you came back like, you must have been changed. You're a different. You've seen all this stuff.
Yeah, okay, so I was changed and I wasn't. I literally went back after a week and started working in the CTV newsroom again. And Trevor Bindu walked by and he's like, "What is happening right now?" He just pointed at me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm doing, what was I doing that day? I was doing closed captioning. So the closed captioning machine didn't always get all the words right. So I would have to go in and physically like change it. He's like, "What are you doing?
Are you serious?"
Yeah, like, what are you doing right now? I'm like, "I don't know, making money again."
I agree with Trevor Bindu.
Yeah. I'm like, making money. He's like, "You cannot do this after doing that." And so I already kind of knew that I was going to move somewhere and do something different. So I had made a decision that either I was going to go to New York or go to London. I kind of had decided. Now, it is so hard to work in the States, like to get a visa. And maybe if ABC News, if I had approached them differently, like right from the get-go, been like, "I want to do this because I want you to hire me in New York," I might have been more successful. But I sort of let that opportunity slip through my fingers, I feel like.
Yeah.
Because I could have approached my opportunity there like I kind of left it and I was like, "Thanks for the job. Here's my $7,000. And I went home. Whereas I should have been, "Where is this going to take me? Are you going to give me a recommendation in New York?" And it's kind of, it's like, the like strike when the iron's hot. I feel like I'm talking too much.
This is an interview with you, so
Yeah,
you're allowed to.
I'm not letting you ask any questions. So I went to England because it's pretty easy to get a visa to work in England. It's called a holiday maker visa.
Yeah, if you're Canadian.
If you're a Canadian.
Or a Commonwealth.
Commonwealth, yep. At the time, you had to be 29 or younger. I believe they've bumped it to 35. You get the visa. The day you arrive in England, they stamp your passport. You can work for 2 years. And it's a 5-year. You have to go in within 5 years once it's on your passport. So I did that, and I got a job at the BBC. And the first question they asked me was, "Do we have to sponsor you?" I'm like, "No, I've got this crazy visa that I can work here."
Well, how do you just get a job at the BBC?
That's
Connections?
No, I applied.
You just applied?
I just applied. I did make a mistake there, though. I should have gone straight to London. So I went to London. I stayed with this guy that I was sort of dating, which helped because I didn't have to pay for anything. So I stayed with him, and I remember thinking, okay, I'm here for 3 weeks. Every day, week a day, I'm going to make 10 new connections.
All right.
Like, this is pounding pavement at its finest.
Yes.
So every day I'm going to either email, call, or go and meet someone in person, but I'm going to make 10. I don't know if I made 10 every day, but that was my number. I was like, once I get to 10, I can say I've done it. And I think a few days I did get to 10. And so I just met with everybody, and I was getting some traction, but not really. And then I started throwing my net a little bit wider, and I applied for a job in Birmingham, and I got it. And it was a 1-year contract at the BBC, and they gave me 5 weeks holiday paid. And I was like, what? And the mistake was, and this is kind of now how I treat a lot of things that come my way, is that I got so excited about it that I forgot the long view. I took my eye off the ball, that wasn't going to help my career. I should stay in London and continue to pound the pavement and make those connections. Instead, I went to Birmingham and worked in a local newsroom for a year.
Because what is your goal in your head at this point? Not a foreign correspondent, but you knew you were going to get to big time. What does that mean? Like news anchor or?
Yeah, I mean, I think I still at this point had that foreign correspondent idea. I think because it was close enough. I'd sort of had an experience where I wasn't happy 100% with the way that my life would have turned. I wasn't happy 100% with the way I was seeing people's lives turn out. But I think I still had this in me that I wanted to go and work in a foreign country for a big network, and maybe they would take me places. I don't know.
But there was more. The local Birmingham job.
It just crushed it. Like, I shouldn't. Although I met one of my dearest friends working at BBC WM. I just went to her wedding in April. So I have no regrets about it, but I took my eye off the ball. Like, I should have been like, no, that's not the right opportunity. I need to stay here. Because the 9/11 reverberations, and then there was the Iraq War, and there was so much going on at the time, which there still is now. I mean, there's always something going on that I could have attached myself to very easily because I already had that experience in Pakistan.
Did you go back to London then?
I was
After
1 year.
the year?
Yes, I did 1 year in Birmingham, and then as soon as the contract was done, I went to London. I'd already started interviewing for jobs in London, and so then I got a job at the BBC World Service in the Caribbean section. Again, probably a weird thing for me to do. Like, why am I working in the Caribbean section? I'm not even from the Caribbean. I don't know anything about the Caribbean.
That's right. The Pakistan Urdu thing made sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, what were you even reporting on?
So we would cover all different types of news out of the Caribbean. It was a show that was produced in London at World Service headquarters. And so you got to be around everything happening around you. But one of the bigger shows would have probably suited me better. But this was fine. I mean, it was the World Service. At the end of the day, it was the World Service, and it was a part-time contract. So it gave me 3 extra days to do other stuff. So that was like my gig that just gave me permanent sort of money, like continuous money. And then I would use the other days. I'd work at a television center on one of the big radio shows. A couple times I worked even on the TV side, like as a writer or as an editorial assistant. So I was picking up a lot of freelance that way. And
Are you ever on screen yet?
So the whole year I was in Birmingham, I was on air, but I wasn't on TV. I was on radio.
Okay.
I mean, even though I say it took my eye off the ball, that led me to CBC Radio.
Mm-hmm.
Like that gave me.
You have experience.
I gave me experience. I had the tape, and I was able to get a job at CBC.
You can always stay. There's always something, right? There's always some value in an experience other than your friend. Your long time friend. Yeah. Of course, there's that, and who knows how it would have turned out in London? Maybe it would have accelerated your path a little bit, but everything happens for a reason.
Without a doubt.
That's the way that I like to think about it.
Yeah.
It's easy to think like you want to go there, especially when you have bad experiences, right? Everything happens for a reason.
Yeah, yeah.
Like I went through that so that I could be the person that I am today, right? But, it's the same thing with like mediocre experiences too, right? And then you came back, did you come back to Canada?
So I was in, so I had 2 years, and I was going to spend that entire 2 years in England.
Yeah.
And I met a really great group of people in London, and I ended up living with them for most of my time that I was in London. We all shared an apartment together on West Ferry Road. It was a really awesome time in my life. A lot of the fun stuff too, like getting to travel, going out loads, doing all that kind of stuff, but then a lot of good journalism too. Like I was working so much that one of my roommates was like, "You need to call in sick today." And I'm like, "But I'm not sick." And he's like, "You need to call in sick today." He goes, "You've been going for like 25 days. You need to have a mental health day, basically."
So you're probably banking a lot of money, though, at this point, too.
Yeah,
then.
but spending a lot.
London. So you're also spending, okay.
Because London is so expensive.
And you said you came back with debt. This is how this started.
Yeah.
So maybe we should fast forward to that. So you come back to Canada.
Yeah.
And you have some debt. How did you pay off your debt?
So I interviewed already for the job at CBC.
Yes.
And so they'd offered it to me before I left.
So
I came to a job, which is a really, I realize it's a very special circumstance because most people come and they have to look for. So I knew I was coming to a job. So
that's nice.
As soon as I started working, I was living at home again. It was so weird how I just go back home.
You went, well, it's nice. We should all do this if possible because it just gives you that like leg up. You're not like sitting there wallowing in debt because you can't pay your rent.
I wanted to get out of that debt because of that experience I had with the credit card many years prior. And so I remember it was about £1,500. I think it was a combination of credit card debt and I was overdrawn on my bank account. So I had to actually put money in to like get it back to zero. I think I only recently closed that HSBC account because I was still doing a tiny bit of freelancing, so I'd get paid into that account. Like, might as well get the British pounds and then figure out later what I want to do with it.
Yeah.
But I think I closed it, or they closed it because I just was inactive.
I mean, knowing what you know today about like overdraft and all that stuff.
Oh, it makes me feel sick. Yeah, because they were charging me every month for having that overdraft.
But I mean, we don't think about these things when we're. It's funny how personal finance just doesn't. It's not top of mind when we're doing other things, right?
Yeah.
And at that point, did you even care about personal finance?
No. When I came to Canada, when I was 28 years old, and I got the job at the CBC, my number one priority was to get my money in order.
Oh, okay.
My number one priority. Pay this debt off.
Yeah. And
so I started looking for real estate. I wanted to buy something. I'm like, I've got this job. I can get a mortgage. I want to buy something.
But what lit this fire? Why now? Because you were just all over the place before, right?
I just wanted to have, I wanted to invest. Like I knew that I wanted to put my money somewhere.
This was the right time.
This was the right time.
Okay.
And so my brother and I, because we were both having this conversation on our own, we put our money together and we bought a triplex in Toronto.
Okay.
And we lived in one apartment and we rented out the other two. And we still own it today.
It's smart.
Yeah, so it's...
this is a common thing for people to say on this show. I bought this property and then and either I still have it today or I rented it out and I lived or it paid for itself.
Yeah.
There's a common theme with wealth and buying things early.
Well, that is the key, right?
Yeah.
Understanding how, getting into the game early is more beneficial than making more money down the road and trying to save more. And the other thing is holding on to it. So, we always see these articles about how renting is better than owning. The best thing that you can do for your personal finance is buy a property and rent it out and then rent something else for yourself. That is the best personal finance situation you can be in.
Yeah.
So you rent the home that you live in, but you also own real estate, but you just don't happen to live in it.
Yeah.
Someone else is paying that
Well,
rent.
why not own your own place, though?
Because it is more expensive to own.
Yeah, it's a good
right?
point.
So when you own something, and like people will argue with me, well, look at the prices, the way they went up in Toronto. Yeah, I mean, there are situations where if you bought at the right time, yes, your home price probably did go up so much that it was worth it for you to be a homeowner. But generally speaking, when you rent, you have more money in your pocket left over at the end of the month that you can then save into whatever you want to save as.
And then you can buy a property somewhere where you don't necessarily want to live, or somewhere where it's affordable.
Yep.
And you don't have to worry about, I got to move there and live there forever.
Yeah, exactly.
Or for 10 years,
yeah,
however long it is. Yeah, it's I'm getting a lot of this advice lately. It's real estate, and this is still true now. Like if people wanted to do this today.
Oh, so I did a video a little while ago about why real estate is still a good investment. So if you go back to 1990, 91, when there was the housing crash in Toronto, you could basically just cut and paste those headlines and put them on like today, like right before the crash. Prices are out of control. They did a profile on this guy who had like a bank job. So I'm assuming he made like a lot of money. I think they even said his salary at the time. He made like $80,000, which is a crazy amount of money at that time. Yeah. And he couldn't afford to live in Toronto. So he used to commute in, I think, from Hamilton or somewhere outskirt of Toronto. If this guy can't afford to live in Toronto, how can regular people? And so it's the exact same stories happening now. Like you're hearing people move further and further out of the city so they can afford to live or afford to work in Toronto. If you bought a house at the peak, so at the peak, I believe in Toronto, the average house price was $235,000 at that time. So say you bought it at the absolute peak. You're the guy that bought the house, and right after that, prices started to go down. You'd still be sitting on like a more than $1 million house today, 20 years later. Like you'd still be much better off if you just held. I mean, real estate is a long game. Like you have to buy it for the long term. I have no time for people who are flipping homes or buying things off plans to get them. I have no time for that because I don't know how. Yeah,
like it was the real estate equivalent of like day trading. Yeah, or even just buying individual stocks and watching them go up and down and selling them or whatever. If they, whenever you feel like it's the right time, they feel too many feelings, right? Yeah,
and the thing with real estate is if you buy it as an investment, it's very difficult to sell it. So that's another thing. It's like if you have that, that trigger kind of finger to sell, then real estate's good for you because it sort of keeps you in check because you've got to like list it and get people it's just a big to do.
You can't just press a button on the computer and sell it. So you got this property and you guys are making money, or it's paying for itself, paying the mortgage on its own, sort of?
Well, we still paid rent. So we decided what we thought rent would be in the apartment that we lived in. Yeah. And so we were still paying, I think we were paying more than we needed to, but both of us were putting $750 out of our own pocket.
So to accelerate the mortgage pay down. Okay.
And we'd borrowed money from our father to do the down payments. We had to pay that money back. Yeah. There was a lot of things that were happening. But eventually now that we've moved out of it, and now that it's been, I don't know, how long has it been now? 14 years. The mortgage covers most of the costs, and we just enjoy the fact that we bought it a long time ago and that it's a good investment for us anyways.
So you had that. You just knew you wanted that. But you're not working in personal finance yet, are you?
No, I'm at the CBC.
Yeah,
so this is when I started. When I think back, I'm like, when did I start? I was always interested in money. How long have we been going? I feel like
we're at about 57 minutes.
Yeah, I think we should. So that's a long time.
That's why I don't ever put a limit on this because we just heard an awesome story about you going to Pakistan with 9/11.
Yeah.
And I don't know if anybody was expecting that. I don't want them to say that it shouldn't be in the show, right?
Right.
Because we have to. We should just be under 45 minutes.
Right,
you know?
right.
That's what I think, because this is your story. You're telling it.
Yeah.
But yeah, like let's go to the personal finance. Or how long did it take you to get there?
So I think I always had an interest of talking about business. I like talking about money. You'll remember Robert Fisher. I used to be an anchor on Global, and then he came over to CBC.
Yeah, I do actually.
And he knew that I'd bought this property, and then we bought another one in 2 years. And so he started telling people I was the Trump of Toronto, which now at the time seemed hilarious, but now I'm like, stop calling me that.
No, not now.
Not now.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, I own 2 little properties with my brother. That's not. It's like,
But it was like is sort of odd to him because nobody else was doing this.
No, I think he just liked. I think he was proud of me.
Sure.
And I think that was his way of saying it.
Yeah, okay.
Because we had a very sort of like, he was a generation older than he is a generation older than me. And if I see him today, he'll comment. He'll be like, you knew you wanted to do this back then. Like you were already socking your money away and investing. And now you're like, look at you. You're talking about personal finance. It's kind of like a father, being very proud of his daughter. Like, look at you.
Done.
Well done, girl.
Well done.
Well done, little girl. So I used to work with this reporter, producer, Carla Weiss. She's now married. Her last name is different now. But I remember she was a business reporter for a little while. And then one day, the Bank of Canada raised rates 50 basis points.
Okay.
And everyone in the newsroom was like, what does that mean? And Carla was the only one that could answer that question. Like, that's a big deal when the bank raises rates 50 basis points, meaning it's almost like 2 rate hikes at once.
So just for people because not everybody knows basis points. So a basis point is like, 50 would be like what, 0.5 or?
Yeah, so half a percentage point.
Exactly.
So normally the Bank of Canada raises rates and we're probably, 25 basis points at a time.
Okay,
so a quarter of a percentage point.
Yeah.
So to raise rates that quickly.
Just all at once.
And so I was like, why is this so exciting? Like, why are they talking to her? And like, why? Like, I remember that story. And she was like, that's a big deal. Like,
half a percent.
It's huge because they're basically saying we got to slow this economy down. Right? It's overheated. We got to slow it down. So that was I remember that. I remember like being interested in like why that was such a big deal and kind of trying to figure out, like, I didn't understand how the Bank of Canada even worked back then. Their mandate was
it's not like a real bank.
Yeah, it's not like a real bank. I was like, so it's not like they don't have branches? Like, yeah.
I want to open a checking account with you.
Yeah, it doesn't work that way. They should probably, just like how I say about the TFSA, it's like misnamed because it gives people an impression that it's a savings account when it's not.
Absolutely.
The Bank of Canada should have a name like the Federal Reserve, where you understand that it is the central bank, that it's not a commercial bank.
It just should, the Canadian Central Bank.
It should be like, the federal something. It should be, they can think, I don't know what they would, like, it could be the Canada Federal Reserve.
Yeah.
There's like the U.S. Federal, I don't know if that would make sense, but they should change the names so it makes more, clarity is key, right? When it comes to things about finance.
They could change a lot of things.
Yeah. To fast forward, I left CBC and I went to CP24 and I was there for a few years.
Okay.
And CP24, the producer at the Toronto Stock Exchange Broadcast Center, TSX Broadcast Center, which still exists today, quit. She wanted to go into acting or something. So she quit pretty abruptly and nobody wanted to do business. And I was like, I want to do business. Send me there. And so I went there and the executive producer said, don't be afraid to put the camera on yourself. I was like, oh, I won't be afraid to put the camera on myself. Because I was already anchoring on the weekend.
I'm ready for this.
And then I get to the TSX Broadcast Center. I'm there 3 days a week and I anchor on the weekend. Someone else does the Thursday, Friday. I do the Monday to Wednesday.
Okay.
And I meet bank CEOs, investment advisors, Patty Lovett-Reed, Wolfgang Klein. These people became my friends. These are like personal finance heavyweights that I met, so I got to pick their brain. The first thing they said was do the Canadian Securities course. That was the first thing I was told. They're like, you don't have time to do your MBA, just do the Canadian Securities course.
And this would just help you with understanding and conversations and stuff like that. Not that you're going to be doing anything with securities.
And give you credibility that you actually are taking...
taking it seriously.
Taking it seriously. If you want to be an expert in something, you should get some courses.
Yeah.
Even though it's not a designation, but it just gives you.
Well, that's a good point because I was like, I'm going to be a personal finance coach. Sure, I have the university degree and 15 years experience working in finance, but maybe I should take something to just, fill in the blanks a little bit. So there's this thing called the Registered Retirement Consultant designation.
Right.
And I got that, and I don't really tell people about it. But I have it, if anybody wants to know.
Yeah.
Right? And I guess that was sort of my thought at the time. I don't want to be the designation guy, but yeah, you're like, this is journalism. This is, you're broadcasting to Canadians all over. You're trusted.
Yeah. And I mean, it gives you a bit of knowledge about things that, I don't remember everything that I learned, but I mean, you know where to get the information. I think that's number one, right? In journalism, you only need to know 10% more than everybody else. You don't really need to know everything. And so that's like, when you become a subject matter expert, like now as a personal finance journalist, I feel like I need to know more than just the 10%. But generally speaking, if someone says something about like for example, this morning, I had to talk about household income to debt ratio. And then the other ratio was income to debt without the household. So one is calculated using disposable income and one is calculated using your gross income.
Okay,
and so they're two different numbers.
Very different numbers.
And so I was like, why is it such a big deal that the number is 15.2? This is what they were talking about this morning. And I realized, it's disposable income. So there's, at least I know how to go and get the information because I'm not like up to date on all my ratios and what, and
I've forgotten all the ratios.
Exactly. So I Googled it and I'm like, okay, now I understand. But if I don't even understand what disposable income means, I'm never going to get anywhere, right?
You need to at least have the basis. And since you didn't get a degree in business or finance, you got in journalism, then this makes sense for you to take a little bit of an extra thing. Yeah.
Yeah, so that started my career in personal finance, where I was really doing like economics and business news proper for a while, doing a lot of market updates because I was at the TSX Broadcast Center.
Yeah.
Then I left CP24 and I went to News Talk 1010. I was their business correspondent for quite a few years. Then I took a little bit of time off and went to TD Bank, which was another very bad mistake because the jobs were drying up. I was freelance. I was starting to like get really nervous. So I took this job thinking this would be my security. It was a very bad idea.
What kind of job was it?
It was
you don't have to get into detail.
No. It was a newly created social media department. I thought it would really fit. But I mean, banks are big, cumbersome.
Yeah.
They move so slow. And when you come from a newsroom.
Yeah, that's so different from your
literally
industry.
I can email and say, can I have this idea on air? And it's on air in an hour.
We're going to fly you to Pakistan tomorrow. Well, that was then. But try to get the approval from that in a bank.
Never. Yeah, it was just too much. And it was not, I didn't even pass probation. Like, they were well aware that it wasn't a good fit either.
Interesting.
So one of the only times I was fired from a job, but it was great. I immediately went back to journalism. I was like, forget this. I immediately went back to journalism.
So again, a reason it was to show you that journalism was your place, right?
Exactly.
What was the purpose of this?
To show that,
that's the way that I see it. Just as an observer, it's like, you got to step away from it.
Yep. To
know that you really belong.
Yeah, and one thing good that came out of that experience was I started to understand how a bank works from the inside.
Look at that too then.
Yeah, so there was that. I started to understand a bit of the lingo that banks use, so I'm able to communicate better with banks when I do talk to them about certain things. And I learned how to make a deck. I know it sounds so silly, but what journalist ever needs to make a deck to show? So when someone says, could you make a deck? And so all of a sudden, that means something on PowerPoint with 10 pages that explains what my idea is.
A pitch deck.
Yeah. I'd never...
You never had... But you wouldn't... Well, how would you pitch ideas? Just go into a room and tell somebody?
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's how it's done in journalism.
Or you send a blurb. It's
that's
called a blurb.
Interesting.
Yeah. So you learn an actual skill.
So different. You learn the corporate way of doing it.
Yeah. The boring way.
Which is the way that I know how to do it as well. You may put together... I had to do a PowerPoint presentation for an interview.
Oh, gosh. Okay.
It was the third one.
Okay.
It was on the vision and values of the company. It was for MLSE. I don't know if they still do it.
Okay.
But I learned the vision and values.
Yeah.
That's for sure. And I got the job.
So you obviously did a good job. So, now, because I have this sort of hybrid job where sometimes I do sometimes work with companies. And so, as an example, I'm going to be speaking in Ottawa next month. And I probably will put together a deck and then use that as my presentation, right?
Yeah.
But I did not understand PowerPoint at all. I had to literally ask someone. I'm like, what is PowerPoint?
So that maybe opened the door a little bit, or gave you a little bit of a start with if you were going to do public speaking in the future. What do you remember? When would have been the first time
I did public speaking?
Yeah, at an event or something.
So I still do freelance for this company called Holmes Publishing.
Okay.
And after the TD situation.
Yeah.
I started just emailing anybody that wanted a personal finance writer.
Sure.
And one of the places I found a lot of work was these small magazines that you get for free.
Oh.
In your mailbox or at the newsstand at the subway or at the Go train station. And so one of them was Holmes Publishing, and Michael Rosette's their publisher
Like
and
in the
CEO.
blue box on the side of the
It's an
corner.
amazing place to get your writing.
Interesting.
And because he didn't have anybody writing personal finance, he's like, yeah, we'll take your stuff. And so I've been working with them now going on since 2011. So what's that, 7 years?
So they always have stuff for you.
I file 2 columns for them. So about once every month. And there's some months I have to file 2. One of the magazines is once every 2 months, like bi-monthly, and one of them is monthly. So there are months where I'm doing 2, and then the alternate month I'm just doing for the 1. So Holmes Publishing sponsors, or I don't know if they still do, but they sponsor the Holmes Show. So he asked me, like, would you like to do a talk about, spending money and saving money?
Awesome.
So I did a deck called on joyless spending. I called it Joyless Spending. So it's about spending money on things that don't make us happy.
Yeah.
And don't do it, basically, was the message. And so all the things that we do in our lives where we're not getting any value out of it. I mean, some things, like, I don't want to go and buy a carpet cleaner, but I have to because I want to keep my carpets clean. You know what I mean?
And that adds value
that
to
adds
your
value
life.
to, yeah, exactly.
So we should think about all transactions in that way, or most of them anyway, big ones especially. Is this adding value? Is that your presentation?
Basically.
Yeah.
And so, and after, I remember that book came out, the Magical Effect of Tidying Up, and it's basically the same thing. You look at something, does it give me joy? If it doesn't have a use, throw it away.
Right,
I'm like, I think that was my idea because I had my joyless spending many years prior before this Magical Effect of Tidying Up book came out.
Did you look out in the audience? Was the author?
Yeah, and she was from Japan. I don't think she was there, but yeah. So that's the
saw
first
a tape of you.
Yeah, maybe,
Definitely.
maybe.
Like, had you done public speaking before that? Then, like,
not really. No,
in general. So
not really. No,
yeah.
I don't really like public speaking. I got to be honest. Like, it makes me really nervous.
Okay,
but I'm getting
Still.
better. I'm getting better. Oh yeah.
Okay.
Because people just stare at you.
But you had been on TV broadcasting for a while up to this point. And on radio, I understand radio is different than video because we're technically on radio now. I feel very comfortable on this.
Yeah.
YouTube, I'm just getting started.
Right.
It's a very different beast.
Right.
So is that how you feel about like public speaking versus being on television?
Yeah. Oh no, being on television, I'm totally fine with.
Yeah.
Because the camera is a crutch, right? Like
Sure.
you feel much more comfortable because you're just talking to an inanimate thing. And even if you have one other person, like an anchor that's interviewing you, or if you're the anchor, it doesn't feel as intense. Even though you might be broadcasting to so many more people, you don't see them. But when you do public speaking, it's like they're just there to see you.
They're all there.
Yeah, and they can't turn you off, and you can't turn them off, and
I forget because I'm better with public speaking than I'm on video.
Right.
Because it's probably because of my years, my whole life performing as a musician, and so the audience doesn't bother me, right? Especially if I know what I'm doing, right? So it's interesting, like what experiences, like you could go to another country and report, like on dangerous situations, and people say like they'd rather die than go speak in front of a group of people, right? That's like on the list. I
mean, it doesn't make me as nervous as it used to.
No. But I think it's interesting to look at that. Like I always assume someone who could write could also speak or host a show, or if you can write, you can, or if you're speaking, you can write. But it doesn't always translate through.
No, of course
they're
not.
very different things. I mean, of course, all this as with your journalism degree.
Yeah,
it's just interesting to look at that and to know that. It's just not easy for everybody to do all these things, and I don't think we realize that. So TD gave you a little bit of kind of a leg up on that. And then you got the speaking. And what's next? What was next?
So that has been now. That's been my life. So after what happened. Sort of 2008 to about 2011, where, contracts didn't get renewed and the TD Bank thing happened. I just said to myself, I don't ever want to have one employer again.
Yeah.
I don't ever want to be beholden to one person or one company or anything. So yes, contracts have come and gone for me. Big contracts have, all of a sudden ended, and it's like a massive, chunk of change coming out of my pocket that I was expecting or I had been getting used to. But I've just been freelance, and I'm always hustling. I'm always trying to get more work. I'm always throwing my net wide, more and more laser focused on personal finance and sort of getting away more from the money and economics, even though I still do that, and some public speaking now. But so that's what I,
Well, because you've built your reputation,
Yeah.
right, as a personal finance expert.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you manage the cash flow gaps? Like, do you have do you put money away for this or that? Like, when you have a contract, you're like, I know this might not last forever, so let's put that in the savings. Or is there you have any tips for someone who does have sporadic income like that?
So, yeah, number one is to have an emergency fund, which I do.
Sure.
And the way that you build that, at least the way that I build it, is that I put 15% of everything I make before tax into my emergency fund. It just goes. It doesn't even, and because I'll get a check here and a direct deposit there. And some companies pay me through this weird system where it goes into PayPal.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter how I get paid. Whatever it is I get paid. So if they paid me $500, I'm putting 15% of that $500 into this emergency account. And when it gets a little bit, like for example, a while ago it ballooned to $20,000, and so I thought, I don't need $20,000 just hanging around in this account. So we just took that money and we put it on the mortgage.
Okay.
So put a $20,000 lump sum payment on the mortgage. This is when we were really trying to get our mortgage paid down.
Or if you don't have a mortgage, maybe that's the time to invest that money.
Invested, yeah. And then when I didn't have that option, when we had it, then my husband and I bought an investment property. So we had a little bit of, so I'm always sort of finding, like I'm doing that 15%. And then when it gets to a number where I'm like, okay, I think I can do something with this money, then I'm doing something proactively with it.
Have you ever had to use it? Like, I'm assuming an emergency in this specific case would be you don't have work for a bit.
Yeah. And we have had to use it. My husband's dad got really sick overseas. He's passed now. This is going back 2 years. And we needed to get some money very quickly. And so that emergency fund came in handy.
Yeah. Otherwise, you would have had to go into debt. Maybe.
Yeah.
Or you wouldn't have been able to do whatever you needed to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is kind of the worst situation to be in, and hard choices to make. Like, you never want money to get in the way of something important.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I mean, people use that excuse to go into debt, I'm sure.
Yeah, and a lot of people use like their line of credit as their emergency fund, which I admit sometimes I think, well, that might be a good idea. Like, why do I have this money on the side? I just take money out. The problem is that when you borrow money from your line of credit, it's a completely different emotion than when you take it out of your So in an emergency situation, you still don't want to be wasting money. So if you can take $3,000 out of the line of credit, why not take $5,000 out? But if you're taking it out of your savings, you're being a little bit more careful. Right?
Yeah, that's a good point. So, how do people, where do they see all this awesome, this is the culmination of all of your years of doing this, is like, you're just killing it on personal finance now. So, where do they go to find you? You
can find me on Twitter. It's always Save Money. Or you can just Google me, Rubina Ahmed-Haq. And there's tons of ways to find me that way.
I'll put info in there. But in YouTube, you have YouTube videos.
Yeah. I mean, YouTube I'm not so big on. My big thing is Twitter. I mean, I'm so busy with freelance work that I haven't been much able to focus on the social side. But I'm always checking. And if you DM me on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook, I always get back to people.
And are you on TV regularly or irregularly? Or do you ever get to do that?
Yeah, I do a pretty regular gig on CBC with CBC News Network. And so I'm often on the business panel.
Okay.
Which is pretty surreal because I appear with some heavyweights.
Cool.
People who have built businesses for millions of dollars, and I get to give my 2 cents of what I think is going on in the economy.
Yeah.
So it's a pretty awesome experience and makes me feel quite proud, I think. I feel like that's one of the things I do that makes me quite happy. And I mean, for 4 years I was on Stephen and Chris, and for 2 years I was on The Goods, which is a lifestyle show. You can still get it.
Like as a finance
I was
person?
their personal finance expert on the show.
Yeah, I like that.
I was their regular personal finance expert. And I do a lot at Global News Toronto.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So people probably see you all over the place. And you're going to be hosting the Canadian Personal Finance Conference?
Yes, I'll be hosting that. It's a 2-day event, November 3rd and 4th, or is it 4th and 5th?
I think, yeah.
Yeah, the Sunday to the Monday. And that's like, I mean, I wrote it in a Instagram post this morning too, it's a huge honor to go as an attendee and then next year come back. I was on a panel last year.
You're an attendee only. Oh, you were on a panel last year.
The
so
first year I was
time.
attendee.
Yeah.
Second year I went, they invited me to come and speak on the panel with Alan Roseman and Melissa Leon.
I was there. I saw that.
Which was, again, a huge honor. And then this year they asked me to host it, which is crazy.
So cool.
And don't they know I'm afraid of public speaking? I have to really get over that.
Well, now that I think about it, this will probably air after the conference.
That's okay.
Because I got a big lineup, and you did great.
Thanks.
That's
really proud of myself.
You did great. You were so good at hosting it. And thanks for telling your story. This is really cool.
Thank you.
I know it seems long, and I've yet to get feedback from people saying it's too long. So please write in if you think these are too long. But I think it's awesome to hear people's stories, and you can press pause, all right, if you want to start it and continue it later. But okay, so Rubina, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
If you like this episode, please subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts or however you get your podcasts. And while you're there, please leave me a 5-star rating, a review, or both. If you're already a subscriber, please join my Facebook group so that I can thank you personally. To find the group, go to Facebook and search for The Personal Finance Show. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Personal Finance Show. I'll be back next week with side hustler and blogger at My Money Chronicles, Jason Butler.